My hands trembled slightly as I signed the final acquisition papers, officially making me, Sarah Johnson, the new owner of Pinnacle Industries. The lawyers exchanged pleased glances as I completed the signature with a confident flourish that belied the storm of emotions inside me. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I caught a glimpse of my father's face as the news reached him, his expression morphing from confusion to disbelief to absolute shock. 5 years ago, he'd looked at me across his imposing mahogany desk and said those words that changed everything. "You're cut off." His voice had been cold, dismissive, as if I were nothing more than a failed investment rather than his daughter. "You clearly don't have what it takes," he'd added, twisting the knife deeper. I still remember how his words had hollowed me out, leaving me empty except for a strange small spark that would eventually grow into an unstoppable fire. The boardroom now fell silent as I stood up, smoothing down my tailored suit. Not the designer label my father would have insisted upon, but my own choice from a sustainable brand that aligned with my company's values. "Shall we go meet the staff?" I asked my new executive team, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. As we walked toward the company-wide meeting where the acquisition would be announced, I couldn't help reflecting on the twisted, painful, yet ultimately empowering path that had led me here. Nobody, least of all my father, could have predicted this outcome when he'd coldly cut me from his life and expectations. But then again, nobody except me knew just how determined I could be when someone told me I couldn't do something. I grew up in a stately colonial home in an affluent Boston suburb, where success wasn't just encouraged, but expected. My father, Richard Johnson, had worked his way up to become vice president of operations at Pinnacle Industries, a fact he never failed to mention at neighborhood barbecues and family gatherings. "Hard work and strategic thinking," he'd say, clapping some neighbor on the shoulder while giving me a pointed look. "That's what separates the achievers from the dreamers." My mother, Eleanor, was always the perfect corporate wife, gracious, supportive, and unfailingly elegant at company functions, though I sometimes caught glimpses of a deep sadness behind her carefully applied makeup. Her own career ambitions in architecture had been quietly shelved when she married my father, something she never complained about, but which I witnessed in the wistful way she'd sometimes trace building designs in magazines. Our family dynamics were complicated further by my younger brother Michael, who somehow always managed to do exactly what pleased our father. His interest in traditional business models and conservative outlook made him the golden child, while my more innovative thinking branded me as the family rebel, despite my perfect grades and exhaustive extracurricular achievements. I remember being 10 years old and bringing home a perfect report card, vibrating with excitement to show my father. He'd glanced at it briefly, nodded, and said, "This is what's expected, Sarah. Excellence isn't exceptional when it's your duty." Nothing was ever quite enough. In high school, I was valedictorian, debate team captain, and started a small business selling handcrafted jewelry that actually turned a profit. My father's response: "Trinkets aren't going to build a career, Sarah. Focus on something substantial." When I got into Harvard Business School, there was finally a flicker of genuine pride in his eyes, though it was quickly tempered with, "Now the real work begins. Don't embarrass me." College became my first taste of freedom from his suffocating expectations, though I still found myself unconsciously seeking his approval. I discovered my passion for business innovation and technology, developing ideas that excited my professors, but which my father dismissed as untested and risky during holiday breaks. The traditional approach has worked for generations. He'd lecture while carving the Thanksgiving turkey. "These tech startups are a bubble waiting to burst." Still, I graduated summa cum laude, giving a commencement speech that earned a standing ovation. My father actually smiled that day, placing a rare hand on my shoulder. "You've made a good start," he said, which from him was practically effusive praise. I didn't realize then that his momentary approval was conditional on my following the exact career path he'd mapped out for me, or that our real conflicts were just beginning. My first job after business school was at Wellington Partners, a prestigious management consulting firm where my father's colleague had helped secure me an interview. "Don't waste this opportunity," my father had warned as I prepared for my first day. "Harold put his reputation on the line for you." Though I'd earned the position through my own qualifications, my father's words planted the first seed of doubt that would grow into a forest of insecurity. Initially, things went well. I worked 16-hour days, impressing senior partners with my thorough analysis and innovative approaches. 3 months in, I was assigned to a major healthcare client, where I identified efficiency improvements that would save them millions. When I shared this success with my father over dinner, his response cut deep. "Anderson's daughter made partner at McKinsey in just 4 years. Let's see if you can match that." No congratulations, just a new higher bar to reach. The pattern continued as I moved up at Wellington. Every achievement met with comparison to someone who'd done better, faster, more impressively. "James Sullivan's son just closed a billion-dollar deal," he'd say casually when I mentioned landing my first major client. The real turning point came when I developed a proposal for a digital transformation strategy that could revolutionize our approach to consulting. My direct supervisor loved it, but when I presented it to the partners, it was unexpectedly shut down. I later discovered my father had played golf with the managing partner the weekend before, expressing concerns about my lack of experience for such a bold move. The betrayal stung worse than the rejection. That Thanksgiving, surrounded by cousins and relatives, my father publicly undermined me again. "Sarah has these idealistic notions about business," he chuckled to my uncle as I explained my ideas about sustainable corporate models. "She'll understand reality once she has more experience." Something in me snapped. "When exactly will that be, Dad? When I'm exactly like you? When I've abandoned every original thought in favor of what worked? 20 years ago?" The table fell silent. My father's eyes hardened. "You're being emotional and unprofessional. This is why I worry about your business judgment." That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with all the things I should have said. The next morning, I confronted him in his home office. "Why can't you ever just support me?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain calm. His response was textbook gaslighting. "I've done nothing but support you, Sarah. If you can't handle constructive criticism, that's your weakness, not mine." I left his office feeling like I was losing my mind. Was I overreacting? Was his undermining actually help that I was too sensitive to appreciate? The self-doubt affected my health. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and battled constant anxiety. Yet somewhere beneath the psychological turmoil, a business idea began forming. A financial technology platform that would make wealth management accessible to average people, not just the wealthy elite my father's generation catered to. When I tentatively shared the concept with my father, his dismissal was immediate and absolute. "Another app? The market's saturated. Besides, wealth management requires expertise and personal relationships, not algorithms." His condescension solidified my determination. I spent nights and weekends developing a business plan, researching the market, and refining my concept. I knew I was onto something potentially game-changing, but my father's voice of doubt had taken up residence in my head, questioning my every decision and idea. The day I resigned from Wellington Partners, the managing partner seemed more surprised than disappointed. "You have a promising career here, Sarah. Why throw that away on an unproven concept?" he asked, echoing my father's sentiments so closely that I wondered if they'd rehearsed it together. I explained my vision for democratizing financial planning through accessible technology, how traditional firms were missing a massive market of young professionals who needed guidance but couldn't afford conventional services. He listened politely but without real interest. "Well, the door is always open if things don't work out," he said with a smile that clearly communicated his expectation of my failure. My initial meetings with potential investors showed promise. 2 angel investors expressed serious interest after seeing my prototype and business plan. One even called my approach refreshingly disruptive in a stagnant industry. For a brief, glorious moment, I felt validated. Then came dinner at my parents' house, where I naively shared my progress. My father's reaction was explosive. "You quit a secure position at a top firm for this? This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision I've warned you about," he shouted, his face flushing dark red. "Financial advising is built on trust and experience, not some algorithm created by a 27-year-old with barely 5 years in the industry." My mother tried to intervene, her voice soft but determined. "Richard, Sarah has clearly thought this through. Maybe we should listen to her vision before judging it." He silenced her with a look before turning back to me. "You're being foolish and arrogant, thinking you can revolutionize an industry you barely understand." Later that night, my mother slipped into the guest room where I was staying. "I believe in you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "He's afraid of change, always has been. But don't let his fear become yours." Her words were a small comfort as I navigated the challenging early days of entrepreneurship. Just as things were gaining momentum, disaster struck. The lead investor who'd seemed most enthusiastic suddenly pulled out with a vague explanation about reconsidering the market opportunity. A week later, the second investor followed suit. It seemed suspicious, and my fears were confirmed when a friend at Wellington called. "Your father's been talking to people in the industry," she said hesitantly. "He's concerned about your venture reflecting poorly on the family name if it fails." He might have mentioned these concerns to Marcus Stevens. Stevens was a golfing buddy of my lead investor. The deliberate sabotage left me reeling and facing a funding gap that threatened to kill my company before it even launched. In desperation, I swallowed my pride and approached my father directly. We met at his club, the kind of old money establishment where even the air feels expensive. "I need a loan," I said bluntly after the pleasantries, "just enough to bridge us to the next funding round. I can show you the projections, the market research, everything." His expression shifted from surprise to something like satisfaction. "So the fantasy venture is already failing?" he asked, sipping his scotch. "I'm not failing. I'm growing, and growth requires capital," I countered, sliding my business plan across the table. He didn't even glance at it. "Sarah, this isn't a legitimate business opportunity. It's a tantrum, your way of rebelling against sensible advice." His words triggered an argument that escalated quickly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "You've never even tried to understand what I'm building," I hissed, conscious of our audience but too hurt to care. "Because what you're building is a house of cards," he responded coldly. "And I won't subsidize delusion." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're cut off, Sarah. No loans, no connections, no referrals. If you want to learn your lesson the hard way, you'll do it without my resources." His final assessment cut deepest. "You simply don't have what it takes to succeed in this business. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can return to a sensible career path." I left the club with my vision blurred by unshed tears, his words echoing in my head. That night in my apartment, the nice one I soon wouldn't be able to afford, I sat on my balcony looking at the city lights, feeling utterly alone. My phone displayed a dozen missed calls from my mother, but I couldn't bear to explain my humiliation, even to her. Somewhere between despair and determination, I made a promise to myself. I would either succeed on my own terms or fail trying, but I would never again seek my father's approval or assistance. 2 months after my father cut me off, I was packing boxes in my luxury apartment, preparing to move to a studio barely bigger than my former walk-in closet. My savings were dwindling rapidly despite my extreme budgeting. The moving company I'd hired, actually just 2 guys with a truck I'd found on Craigslist, dropped and broke the antique desk that had been my grandmother's. I sat among the splinters and cried, not for the desk itself, but for everything it symbolized: my previous life, my family connections, the ease I'd taken for granted. The tiny studio apartment in a decidedly unglamorous neighborhood became my new reality and company headquarters. I took odd jobs to keep myself afloat: bartending on weekends, freelance consulting work, even dog walking for the wealthy residents in my old building who didn't recognize the fall in my circumstances. During the day, I continued developing my financial platform between shifts, working on a laptop that increasingly showed signs of impending failure. My credit cards maxed out. My student loans entered repayment. Collection agencies began calling. Through it all, my father maintained his silence, refusing my calls and returning a Christmas gift unopened. My mother visited once, arriving with grocery bags and a tearful hug. "He's being stubborn," she explained, as if his behavior were merely an annoying personality quirk rather than emotional abandonment. "He really does think he's helping you learn some kind of lesson." She pressed an envelope into my hand before leaving. "Not enough money to make a difference in my business, but enough to keep my electricity on for another month." "Don't tell your father," she whispered, and I saw in her furtive manner the dynamics of my parents' relationship with new clarity. My health deteriorated as stress and overwork took their toll. I developed migraines, lost 15 pounds from my already slim frame, and caught every seasonal virus as my immune system weakened. One particularly bad day, I was sitting in a coffee shop using their free Wi-Fi when my laptop finally died completely. I put my head down on the table, too exhausted and overwhelmed to even cry. "Rough day?" asked a voice above me. I looked up to see a man about my age with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Rough year," I replied with a humorless laugh. Alex turned out to be a programmer looking for a new project after his startup had been acquired. When I explained my concept for democratizing financial planning, his eyes lit up with genuine interest, the first positive response I'd received in months. "The technical architecture you're describing is challenging but definitely possible," he said after I'd sketched my ideas on a napkin. "And honestly, it's a service I would use myself." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of my old confidence. Alex joined my one-person company for a fraction of his market value and equity that would only matter if we succeeded. We worked from my tiny apartment, taking turns at the single desk, our laptops connected to extension cords that snaked across the floor. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly. A former client from Wellington reached out after hearing I'd gone independent. "I'm not a big investor," Janet explained, "but I inherited $50,000 from my aunt, and I believe in what you're trying to build. Consider it angel investment from someone who's decidedly not an angel." Her faith in me, a virtual stranger, brought me to tears after so much rejection. Somehow news of Janet's investment reached my father. I learned this when my brother called, sounding uncomfortable. "Dad's on a rampage," Michael explained. He told his golf buddies that his daughter is taking charity because her business idea can't attract legitimate investment. The comment should have devastated me, but instead, I felt an odd sense of liberation. My father was still thinking about me, still bothered by my persistence. It meant I wasn't forgotten, just desperately misunderstood. That night, staring at my apartment ceiling where water stains spread like continents on a bizarre map, I hit emotional rock bottom. The pain of my father's rejection, the financial struggles, the uncertainty of my future. It all crashed down. At once. I sobbed until my body ached and no more tears would come. But in that empty, hollowed-out moment, I found something unexpected. Absolute clarity. I would succeed not to prove my father wrong, but because my vision deserved to exist in the world. His approval or disapproval had occupied too much space in my mind for too long. As dawn broke, I made a cup of instant coffee and opened Alex's laptop. It was time to rebuild, but this time without the shadow of my father's expectations hanging over every decision. Alex and I established our makeshift office in my tiny studio apartment, with a folding table serving as our desk and milk crates as our filing system. We called our company FinEdge, reflecting our position at the cutting edge of financial technology. Our first breakthrough came when a small credit union in Vermont agreed to test our financial planning platform with their members. "We can't pay much," the manager admitted, "but we can provide real-world feedback and data." That first client relationship taught us more than any business school case study. We discovered users wanted simplicity above all, financial planning stripped of jargon and pretension. We worked 18-hour days refining our algorithm, fixing bugs, and responding to user feedback. I lived on ramen and coffee, having calculated that each dollar saved extended our runway by precious minutes. The dark circles under my eyes became a permanent feature, but for the first time since childhood, I felt truly purposeful. 3 months into development, our platform helped a factory worker identify enough savings to finally pay off his high-interest credit cards. When he emailed us his thanks, I printed his message and taped it to our wall. "This is why we exist," I told Alex, who nodded in understanding. That single success story became our compass when technical challenges or financial pressures threatened to overwhelm us. As word spread among smaller financial institutions, we slowly built a portfolio of clients who couldn't afford the big consulting firms, but desperately needed technological modernization. I applied everything I'd learned at Wellington, but with a crucial difference. Instead of serving only wealthy clients, we focused on institutions that served everyday Americans. My approach to business evolved through necessity and experience. Without my father's connections or resources, I built relationships based on genuine value and mutual benefit rather than golf club memberships. When we couldn't afford expensive software, we found open-source alternatives. When traditional marketing was beyond our budget, we built community through educational content and word of mouth. Each constraint forced innovation that ultimately strengthened our business model. My breakthrough meeting with Elaine Wong happened almost by accident. She attended a financial technology conference where I was speaking on a panel as a last-minute replacement. After my presentation about democratizing wealth management, she approached me with pointed questions that initially seemed critical, but revealed a deep understanding of our industry's challenges. "You're addressing a gap most established firms don't even recognize exists," she said finally. "I'd like to continue this conversation." Elaine became more than an investor. She became a mentor who helped me translate my vision into a strategic business plan. "Your father did you a favor," she said during one of our meetings, surprising me with the mention of my family situation, which I'd eventually shared with her. "You've built something authentic because you had no other choice." Most entrepreneurs with family money never develop that muscle. Our team grew cautiously. First a dedicated customer service specialist, then another developer. We moved from my apartment to a small office above a deli, where the smell of pastrami wafted through our floorboards around lunchtime. Every team member believed in our mission with an intensity that transformed work into purpose. My father, of course, remained unimpressed. At a family wedding, I overheard him describing my business to a cousin. "Sarah's playing entrepreneur with her little app company. It's a phase she needs to work through." Rather than confronting him, I simply walked away, recognizing that his opinion had lost its power to wound me. My mother noticed the change in me. "You seem settled," she observed during one of her secret visits to my new office. "I am," I replied, realizing the truth of it. "I'm building something that matters, with people who believe in the same things I do." Our first significant validation came when a regional banking association selected FinEdge for their Innovation Award. The recognition brought attention from industry publications and potential clients. The award ceremony was the first time I could afford a new dress since starting the company. a simple but elegant blue sheath that represented both professional success and personal restraint. As I accepted the small crystal trophy, I scanned the audience briefly, half expecting to see my father despite not having invited him. He wasn't there, of course, but his absence no longer felt like a void. I had built a new professional family who valued my contributions without qualification or comparison. That night, celebrating with my team at a restaurant nicer than any we'd visited together, I realized I had developed a new measure of success. Not my father's approval, but the impact of our work on real people's financial well-being. The painful journey had stripped away my inherited definitions of achievement and replaced them with something more meaningful and authentically mine. 2 years after my father cut me off, FinEdge had transformed from a desperate gamble into a growing company with 27 employees and offices that actually had windows. Our proprietary algorithm for financial planning had evolved into a comprehensive platform that smaller banks and credit unions could use to compete with the digital offerings of major financial institutions. Industry publications began referring to us as disruptors and innovators, labels that would have once seemed presumptuous, but now felt like accurate descriptions of our impact. The turning point in our growth came when Elaine's venture capital firm led a Series A funding round that injected $8 million into FinEdge. The investment allowed us to hire specialized talent, enhance our technology infrastructure, and expand our marketing efforts beyond word of mouth. My role evolved from doing everything myself to learning how to delegate and lead. I still worked punishing hours, but now from a sense of passion rather than panic. Our team culture reflected the lessons I'd learned through hardship. We valued results over appearances, collaboration over competition, and purpose over prestige. Each new hire was carefully evaluated not just for skills, but for alignment with our mission of making financial planning accessible to everyone. The development of our proprietary algorithm marked our transition from promising startup to legitimate industry player. Unlike conventional wealth management software that required substantial human intervention, our system could generate personalized financial recommendations based on a user's unique circumstances and goals, using machine learning, to continuously improve its advice. Banks that adopted our platform reported increased customer satisfaction and, more importantly, improved financial outcomes for their clients. My personal life remained largely non-existent, with the company consuming most of my waking hours. Alex had evolved from my first employee to a trusted friend, and now Chief Technology Officer, occasionally reminding me that even revolutionary algorithms need sleep to function properly. I dated sporadically, but never seriously, unable to fully invest in relationships while building the business. My mother remained my tenuous connection to family life, her visits becoming more open as my company's success made my father's disapproval seem increasingly unreasonable. It was through my mother that I first learned of Pinnacle Industries' struggles. "Your father won't admit it," she confided during lunch at my favorite sandwich shop. "But the company hasn't adapted well to digital transformation. The board is putting tremendous pressure on the executive team." I felt a complicated mix of vindication and concern. The traditional approach my father had defended so vigorously was proving insufficient in a rapidly evolving marketplace. Further investigation revealed that Pinnacle, once an industry leader, had fallen behind competitors who embraced technological innovation more readily. Their stock had dropped 30% over 18 months, and rumors of potential acquisition swirled in industry circles. I followed the news with detached interest until a Wall Street Journal profile of FinEdge described us as the type of innovative partner that struggling traditional firms like Pinnacle Industries desperately need. The journalist had made the connection I'd carefully avoided, mentioning that FinEdge founder Sarah Johnson brings personal insight to the financial industry's generational divide, as her father serves as VP of Operations at Pinnacle. The article prompted a rare direct contact from my father, a terse email stating simply, "I would appreciate discretion regarding family connections in your media appearances." Not congratulations on the profile, not acknowledgement of our success, just concern for appearance and reputation. His message crystallized something I'd been considering but hadn't fully articulated. Pinnacle Industries represented exactly the type of company our technology could help, and their market position made them potentially available for acquisition. The idea seemed simultaneously perfect and impossible. The ultimate vindication and a business move that made strategic sense independent of personal history. While I contemplated this possibility, FinEdge continued its upward trajectory. We were featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, and I was invited to speak at financial technology conferences alongside executives from companies 100 times our size. Our team expanded to over 40 people, necessitating a move to larger offices in a converted warehouse space that reflected our blend of technological innovation and practical purpose. My father still refused to acknowledge my success directly, though my brother reported that he'd seen the Forbes article open on our father's desk before being quickly shuffled under other papers when Michael entered the room. "He's tracking your progress," Michael said during one of our infrequent calls. "He just doesn't know how to reconcile it with his prediction of your failure." I had long since stopped seeking my father's approval, but his continued dismissal still carried a sting I couldn't entirely eliminate. The idea of acquiring Pinnacle Industries evolved from an emotional fantasy to a legitimate business strategy, as I discussed expansion options with our board and advisors. Pinnacle's established client base and market presence, combined with our innovative technology, could create a powerful market contender almost overnight. The company's declining stock price made the acquisition financially feasible, especially with additional investor support. As the possibility became more concrete, I found myself lying awake at night, questioning my true motivations. Was this sound business strategy or elaborate revenge? The answer, I gradually realized, was both, and that complexity would need to be managed carefully if we proceeded. Acquisition targets need to be evaluated on multiple dimensions, I explained to our leadership team, standing before a whiteboard filled with potential growth strategies. Market position, cultural fit, technology integration potential, and, of course, financials. I deliberately avoided mentioning the personal connection to Pinnacle Industries, focusing instead on objective business criteria. Our CFO, Marcus, reviewed Pinnacle's public financial statements with clinical precision. Their fundamentals remain relatively strong despite the stock decline. They have an established client base, minimal debt, and significant market share in traditional sectors. Their primary weakness is technological stagnation. Alex, now our CTO, nodded in agreement. Their systems are at least a generation behind. Integration would be challenging but ultimately valuable. We could modernize their offering while gaining access to enterprise-level clients we currently can't reach. As the discussion continued, Elaine Wong observed me with knowing eyes. After the others left, she closed the conference room door. "Are we going to acknowledge the elephant in the room?" she asked directly. "You're proposing we acquire the company where your father works, the same father who said you'd fail." I appreciated her directness. "I won't pretend there's no personal satisfaction in the symmetry," I admitted. "But if this weren't a sound business decision, I wouldn't suggest it. Pinnacle has exactly what we need: institutional clients, market credibility, and established revenue streams. We have what they need: technological innovation and a vision for the future." Elaine studied me carefully. "I believe you, but the board will need convincing that this isn't an emotional decision, and you'll need to be honest with yourself about how your personal history might cloud your judgment." She was right, of course. I spent the next week preparing the most detailed acquisition analysis I'd ever conducted, examining every aspect of Pinnacle's business and our potential synergies. The numbers supported my instinct. This acquisition made strategic sense regardless of personal history. Our board meeting to discuss the potential acquisition lasted 5 hours, with every aspect of the proposal scrutinized. One board member voiced the concern most were thinking, "What happens when you're suddenly your father's boss? Have you considered the personal dynamics? I had prepared for this question. I've thought about little else, I acknowledged. But I've built this company by separating personal feelings from business decisions. That won't change if we acquire Pinnacle. In the end, the board approved pursuing the acquisition with cautious enthusiasm, contingent on favorable due diligence and successful negotiations with Pinnacle's board. The path from strategic decision to implementation required intensive work with investment bankers, lawyers, and our executive team. We secured additional funding commitments from existing investors, impressed by our detailed integration plan. Throughout this process, I maintained absolute secrecy regarding our target, with only our senior leadership and board knowing Pinnacle's identity. My brother's call came during this intense planning period. "Dad's not doing well," Michael said, without preamble. "The pressure at work is getting to him. He looks 10 years older than he did last year." I felt an unexpected pang of concern. "Is he ill?" I asked, surprised by my own worry. "Not physically, but his position is threatened. There's talk of restructuring, and his traditional approach isn't winning him allies on the board." The information was relevant to our acquisition planning, but also stirred complicated emotions. My mother's subsequent lunch visit added another dimension. "He'd never admit it, but your father misses you," she said while picking at her salad. "He keeps your business articles in his desk drawer. I found him reading one late at night." Her revelation couldn't undo years of rejection, but added nuance to my understanding of our estrangement. "Has he ever said he was wrong about me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Her sad smile was confirmation enough. As our acquisition plan progressed, I found myself increasingly conflicted. The business case remained compelling. Pinnacle's client relationships and market position would accelerate our growth by years. Yet the personal implications loomed larger as the possibility became more concrete. Would acquiring my father's company heal our relationship or destroy any possibility of reconciliation? During a late-night strategy session, Alex asked the question I'd been avoiding. "If we acquire Pinnacle, what happens to your father?" I had considered various scenarios, but hadn't reached a definitive answer. From a purely business perspective, his role would likely be redundant, I admitted. But immediately terminating him would be perceived as personal revenge, damaging our integration efforts. Alex pushed further. "And from a non-business perspective, what do you want to happen?" His question forced me to confront my complicated feelings. Despite years of hurt, some part of me still wanted my father's recognition, not his humiliation. The realization surprised me with its intensity. After weeks of preparation, due diligence, and internal debate, I gathered our executive team for the final decision. "We've analyzed this opportunity from every angle," I said, looking at each person around the table. "The financial models support the acquisition. Our technical teams believe integration is feasible. Our cultures will require careful management but share fundamental values of client service and excellence." I took a deep breath before continuing. "I've also considered the personal dimension thoroughly. I believe I can separate my history with Pinnacle's leadership from our business decisions. If at any point you feel I'm failing to do that, I expect you to call me out." The decision was unanimous. We would proceed with an offer to acquire Pinnacle Industries. That night, I sat alone in my office long after everyone had left, looking at a photo of my father from the company website. His stern expression revealed nothing of the man who had once taught me to ride a bike and congratulated me on my Harvard acceptance. "I hope we're both ready for this," I whispered to his image, before closing my laptop and heading home to prepare for the most consequential business negotiation of my life. The acquisition process unfolded with methodical precision over 3 intense months. Our initial approach to Pinnacle's board was met with skepticism until they reviewed our detailed proposal and financing commitments. "Your offer represents a 35% premium over current market value," their lead director acknowledged during our first formal meeting. "That demands serious consideration." Negotiating directly with Pinnacle's board while keeping my father unaware required careful choreography. Board meetings were scheduled when he would be traveling, and our company name was obscured behind a holding company in initial discussions. I felt a strange combination of professional confidence and personal apprehension during these high-stakes negotiations. In boardrooms where men twice my age scrutinized every aspect of our offer, I found myself channeling an unexpected source of strength, the very determination my father had inadvertently fostered through his rejection. The due diligence process revealed Pinnacle's challenges were even more significant than we'd realized. Their technology infrastructure was obsolete, their client acquisition had stalled, and their market position was eroding faster than public financials suggested. Yet their fundamental business, providing financial services to mid-sized companies, remained valuable and complementary to our focus on individual financial planning. After weeks of negotiation, counteroffers, and legal wrangling, Pinnacle's board voted to accept our acquisition offer. The shareholders will be well served by this transaction, their chairman stated formally as we reached agreement on final terms. Your vision for integration represents the best path forward for the company. The night before the acquisition would be announced publicly, I barely slept, my mind cycling through scenarios for the inevitable confrontation with my father. Would he resign immediately? Would he acknowledge the irony of our reversed positions? Would there be any possibility of healing our relationship in this new context? The morning of the announcement, I arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters flanked by our executive team and acquisition integration specialists. The lobby featured the company's logo in polished brass, soon to be replaced with our combined branding. Employees watched curiously as our group was escorted to the executive floor where a company-wide meeting had been called. In the boardroom, Pinnacle's directors and executive team awaited us, my father among them, still unaware of who had acquired his company. I observed him from the doorway before entering. His hair grayer than I remembered, new lines etched around his mouth. His posture slightly less commanding. For a moment, I saw not the man who had rejected me, but simply an aging executive facing an uncertain future. The chairman began the meeting with corporate formality. As you know, the board has accepted an acquisition offer that we believe represents the best interests of our shareholders and the future of Pinnacle Industries. Today, I'm pleased to introduce the leadership team of our acquiring company, FinEdge Technologies. As I stepped forward, my father's expression transformed from professional neutrality to shock, color draining from his face as recognition dawned. For those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Johnson, founder and CEO of FinEdge, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We're excited about the future we can build together, combining Pinnacle's established market presence with our technological innovation. I continued my prepared remarks about integration plans and shared vision while my father remained frozen in his seat, his eyes never leaving my face. After the formal meeting concluded and next steps were outlined, I approached my father directly. "Do you have a moment to speak privately?" I asked, conscious of curious eyes watching our interaction. He nodded stiffly, leading me to his office without a word. The space was exactly as I would have expected. Traditional, imposing, with achievements prominently displayed but no personal photos or touches. He closed the door and turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Was this your plan all along? To humiliate me?" The accusation stung despite my preparation. "This acquisition makes strategic sense for both companies," I replied, maintaining professional composure. Pinnacle needs technological modernization, and FinEdge needs established institutional clients. The personal connection is coincidental. He laughed without humor. "Coincidental? You expect me to believe that? You bought my company to prove me wrong." "I built a successful company because I believed in my vision," I countered, feeling my careful composure slipping. "A vision you dismissed completely. The fact that our success positioned us to acquire Pinnacle is a business reality, not a personal vendetta." His face flushed with anger. 5 years in business and you think you know everything. You've just spent a fortune on a company you don't understand, with client relationships built over decades that will walk out the door when they see a 20-something in charge. The dismissal was so familiar it almost felt comforting. The same underestimation that had fueled my determination for years. I'm 32, Dad. And I've spent those 5 years building a company valued at over $200 million because we solve real problems for our clients. Problems that Pinnacle has ignored while clinging to outdated methods. Our confrontation escalated. Years of unspoken hurt and anger finally finding voice. He accused me of betrayal and revenge. I countered with specific examples of his undermining and rejection. The conversation laid bare the dysfunction of our relationship, but also unexpectedly cleared the air between us. Finally, exhausted, we reached an impasse. "So what happens now?" he asked, gesturing to his office. "You fire me. Publicly? Complete your revenge?" The question crystallized the pivotal moment we had reached. I had the power to terminate him, a decision that would be justified by typical acquisition restructuring. Many in my position would have savored that reversal. Instead, I considered what would truly serve both the business and my own healing. "That depends," I said carefully. "Can you work with me rather than against me? Can you acknowledge that innovation and tradition both have value? Because Pinnacle's client relationships are critical to our combined success, and no one understands those relationships better than you do." His surprise was evident. Whatever he had expected, revenge, termination, humiliation, this wasn't it. For the first time in our conversation, he truly looked at me, not as a daughter who had defied him or a business rival who had outmaneuvered him, but as a leader making a reasoned decision. In that moment of genuine recognition, I felt a shift in our dynamic that no amount of success or power could have forced. The path forward remained uncertain, but the conversation had opened a door I had long assumed permanently closed. The integration of FinEdge and Pinnacle Industries progressed with the expected challenges of combining different corporate cultures and technologies. I maintained a delicate balance, respecting the institutional knowledge of Pinnacle's veteran employees while implementing necessary modernization. My decision to offer my father an advisory role focused on client relationships proved controversial among my leadership team, but ultimately beneficial for the transition. His initial resistance manifested as rigidity in early integration meetings. "These clients have specific expectations based on decades of relationship building," he would argue when our teams proposed changes. "Your algorithms can't replace human judgment built on experience." Rather than dismissing his concerns as he had once dismissed mine, I instituted a process where each significant change required evaluation for both innovation potential and relationship impact. This balanced approach gradually earned respect from both sides of the merged organization. 3 months into the integration, I invited my father to observe a demonstration of our enhanced platform, incorporating traditionalist elements he had advocated for alongside our algorithmic innovations. As he watched client scenarios playing out with improved outcomes, I noticed a subtle shift in his expression. Not quite approval, but genuine interest. "The risk assessment module is more sophisticated than I expected," he acknowledged, his first professional compliment to my work. "Our clients in manufacturing will appreciate the sector-specific analysis." This small moment of recognition meant more than I cared to admit. The corporate restructuring proceeded more smoothly than industry analysts had predicted. We preserved most jobs while creating new roles that hadn't existed in either original company. Pinnacle's aging headquarters was renovated to create a more collaborative environment, symbolizing the blend of tradition and innovation we sought to achieve. Trade publications that had initially characterized our acquisition as a tech upstart swallowing a struggling dinosaur began describing us as a model for generational transition in financial services. My relationship with my father evolved, gradually through professional interaction, Our weekly strategy meetings focused on business matters, but occasionally veered into territory we had never navigated successfully before. Mutual respect. 6 months after the acquisition, he surprised me by implementing one of our technological innovations with his most traditional client, resulting in a significant expansion of services. "You were right about the potential here," he said during our review meeting, the admission clearly difficult for him. Their CFO is talking about rolling this out company-wide. The personal breakthrough came unexpectedly during a client dinner where we were both present. The client, a manufacturing executive who had known my father for 20 years, asked about our family connection. "Sarah is my daughter," my father replied, then added something that stopped my rehearsed response cold. "I failed to recognize her vision initially, but she's proven me wrong in the most impressive way possible." The simple acknowledgement, offered publicly without prompting, began healing a wound I had carried for years. Later that evening, as we waited for our cars, he turned to me with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "Not just for doubting your business acumen, but for making my approval conditional on you following my exact path." The apology wasn't perfect. He still didn't fully understand how deeply his rejection had hurt me, but it was genuine. "I needed to find my own way," I replied, choosing careful honesty over lingering resentment. "And maybe I needed to prove myself without your help to become the person I am now." Our reconciliation developed slowly, marked by occasional setbacks when old patterns emerged, but founded on a new mutual respect. My mother observed the change with quiet satisfaction, later confessing she had never believed healing was possible. "You're both so stubborn," she remarked during a rare family dinner at my apartment. It took something as dramatic as this to break the stalemate. The merged company exceeded market expectations, with our stock price rising 60% in the first year after acquisition. The business press attributed our success to the unique combination of Pinnacle's established client relationships and FinEdge's technological innovation, precisely the synergy I had envisioned. More meaningful than the financial success was the evolution in my relationship with achievement itself. The desperate need for validation that had driven me initially had transformed into something healthier: pride in creating value and improving financial outcomes for our clients. One evening, working late in my office, I found my father at my door holding a framed article, the first major profile of me after starting FinEdge. "I kept this hidden in my desk drawer for years," he admitted, placing it on my table. "I couldn't reconcile my pride in your determination with my conviction that you were making a mistake." The gesture symbolized how far we had come. As I reflect now on the 5-year journey from rejection to reconciliation, I realize the most profound lesson wasn't about business strategy or even personal vindication. Success didn't come from proving my father wrong, but from finding the courage to pursue my vision despite his disapproval. True independence isn't about rejection of others' values, but about defining your own and living accordingly. The company continues to thrive, but my measure of success has fundamentally changed. It's no longer about my father's approval or even market validation, but about building something meaningful that improves people's financial well-being. The painful rejection that once devastated me ultimately forced me to develop resilience and clarity about my own values, gifts I might never have received had my path been easier. Have you ever had to choose between someone's approval and your own vision for your life? What gave you the strength to follow your own path, even when it meant disappointing people who mattered to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the most difficult relationships teach us the most valuable lessons about ourselves. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to reconciliation. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more authentic stories of transformation. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' approval. You have the power to define success on your own terms.